Harry, thanks so much for joining us.
My
For
pleasure.
the latest edition of To Be Continued, which is our online interview video series with the legends of disco. And nobody can tell a story about the history of disco without not only including you, but pointing to you as, dare I say, which has nothing to do with your age, the godfather of this movement. You know, people don't realize that the disco period really only lasted 3 years in terms of contemporary and commercial pop culture in the 70s. But it started way before.
Right.
And for reasons unbeknownst, people are absolutely fascinated with this period of music. My analogy somewhat is the way that Marilyn Monroe and Janis Joplin and James Dean and Jimi Hendrix passed away early. We sort of remember them the way they looked back then. And we think of disco as this moment in time that's up on a pedestal. But here's the interesting thing about Harry Casey of Casey and the Sunshine Band. While some artists in that period had one #1 pop record in the United States, I believe you had 5. And not only did you have 5 as an artist, but you're the writer and the co-producer, if not producer, of all of them. So that's just a really quick blush on your career. But if I can, because you and I have spoken before, take me back to the late 60s, early 70s, before you became a recording artist, because your story of how you got involved in the music business had less to do, I think, about the music and more to do about the administrative.
Well, I mean, I always knew or dreamed that this is what I would be doing. I never could explain it. I even had a time in my head that was given me of 21, somewhere around there, and it was right around that age. I never thought of anything else, of doing anything else. It's just like I was born with this direction and it was in my head, and I wasn't sure how it was going to happen or how it was going to play out. I lived in Miami. Most things happened in New York and California or Tennessee or in Detroit or maybe Atlanta a little bit, but nothing really that much that I knew of in Miami. I knew there was a recording studio down here. That's about it, because my family has recorded many gospel albums and had recorded records, you know, in the local recording studio here in Miami. Criteria it was called at the time. And so I was always around music. My mother loved music. My mother loved to dance. She loved going to clubs. I found out her and her sisters did radio commercials for one of the place called Johnny and Mac by the railroad track. It was a tire company or something, or transmission company, and they did the commercials for that. Later on, I found out my mother used to hang out with like Aretha Franklin and Sam and Dave and you know, all these artists that would come to Miami and go to the clubs, and my mother would be there with them. And so, but anyway, my thing started as I just loved music. I loved from the moment, I mean, my mother always, she loved R&B music. She loved Nancy Wilson. She loved the Flamingo. She loved all this great R&B music. And it was always played in our house, besides from the gospel music. And my father's side of the family were music inclined. They also did gospel music, but they were from Georgia, so they listened to a lot of country and stuff. So growing up, and my father never listened to any type of music that I know of. I think the only time he ever bought a radio or record player was for my mother. So I grew up pretty much with music in the house all the time because my mother loved music. She loved to dance, and I became infatuated with it. And as soon as I had my first record player, I think, which when my grandfather passed away, gave me his record player and a bunch of 78s, and that just opened a lot of doors. And I was just always around music, my whole family. So my craving of wanting to have the latest record and buy all the records and everything would lead me to not only purchasing them when they came out, but going back, and stores would do these sellouts, I guess, and have these big bins of 45s or whatever, and offer 5 for 60 cents or 70 cents after they'd been off the charts or whatever. And I just got into going through those bins and getting turned on to even more music than I had missed or whatever, than was already being played on the radio. So I pretty much spent every dime that I made buying records. So when the opportunity came, I first got a job at a drugstore, and across the street was a record store. And an opening came up at the record store, and I applied and I got the job at the record store. I thought, this is going to be great because now I can buy records wholesale. And so, and I took my job very seriously. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed giving, introducing people to new songs. And every time they'd come in, if they came in to buy one record, they usually walked out with 10 because I enjoyed turning them on to new songs and stuff. And
Did you play them music at the store or just recommend titles?
No, because a lot of times they'd come in and they'd hum a song they didn't even know what it was. And I'd say, oh, I just got this brand new song. And you're going to love it. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. And so we would play the records in the store. And we were always playing something in the store anyway, whatever's new out, an album or 45s or whatever. But it was always, hey, you want to hear a little bit of this? And you play a little bit. Oh, I'll take that one. Here's another one. And I'll take that one. And besides that, the amazing thing about 45s and LPs and that sort of thing is all this information was always on the record. So not only who wrote the song, who produced the song, but the name of the record company and the address of where the company was. And I noticed at one point that some of these records I was pitching said 495 Southeast 10th Court, Hialeah, Florida, which is the town which I was living in and where the record store was. And we would place our orders on Mondays and Thursdays and pick them up on Tuesdays and Fridays. I eventually found out that one of the people that I had known growing up, his name was Steve Alamo he was the MC of a show called Where the Action Is that came on every day at 4:30 in the afternoon. And he also had some records out by him on himself. And I had seen some records by Betty Wright and some other artists had the same addresses where I was going to pick up records. So I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And I wanted to hang out there. So I went to Henry and asked Henry for a job. And he said he didn't have any at the time because I was having problems at the record store. The boss was just hard to work for. I loved him, but it was just hard to work for at times, and I needed to get out. So Henry said, no, he doesn't have any jobs or anything. And so I went and got a job at his competitor. And after work, the competitor was around the corner. So after work, I would just go hang out over at TK. And I was introduced to someone and said, who I really needed to meet was Clarence Reed. And Clarence Reed was one of the main writers at TK at the time for Betty Wright and for a lot of the artists there. And Clarence had a hit called Nobody But You, Babe. Betty had just had the Cleanup Woman, I think. So I used to hang out in the lobby there. In the very back was this little office. Upstairs was the small studio. In the very back was Henry's big office. And then there was a couple offices in between. And I'd hang out in the back there waiting for Clarence Reed. And I guess it kind of became a joke for everybody because I guess a lot of people were told to wait for Clarence, and Clarence would never show up. He would tell you to be there and he would never show up. So in hanging out there, I just made myself useful. The phone ring back there, nobody would answer. I answered the phone. If the trash looked like it was full, I'd empty the trash. Eventually, I made friends with a girl who worked in the promotion department, and I started just doing little things. At the same time, Atlantic and Warner Brothers were pulling all their stock from independent distributors and forming WIA, which was going to distribute their own product, and it all had to be boxed up and stuff. And upstairs over the main offices in the distributorship was a huge attic. It must have been 1,000, 1,500 square feet or whatever. And it was stacked with boxes and boxes of 45s and stuff. It was like a treasure. It was like finding the end of the rainbow for me, because here was all these 45s and all, I mean, just, oh my, I was in heaven. And Henry said I could have whatever I wanted out of there. And also in boxing up the records, Henry would give me promos and things like that. I really wasn't on a salary, but I didn't mind doing it or whatever. I'd already worked my day and I had nothing to do, you know, after work. So it was all fine to me, and the reward was greater than the salary could have ever been. So, you know, so and just hanging out day after day after day after day. And there was a piano in the room, and I'd go in there and I'd play on the piano. Henry would say, "Hey, what's up, Casey?" And you know, I got to, you know, I got to become one of the regular. Henry gave me a key to the door. Finally, I'd hung out there so much, and eventually I started doing some backgrounds on some sessions, or I was allowed to go upstairs during sessions and just hang out and play on a few things. And then I ended up co-writing a couple things with Clarence Reed, and Henry knew that I loved to write or whatever. And the process at TK at the time was, you would go and you, excuse me, would cut a demo. And if he liked the demo, he'd give you the $25 or $100, whatever it is, to pay the musicians to re-record it and make the actual record. So there were a lot of artists there that were kind of not, you know, there was the key artists that they paid a lot of attention to, and then there was some they just seemed to appease or never were going anything. So I gravitated towards the ones who wanted their dreams, but it seemed like nobody was paying too much attention to. So I started making these little records with them or whatever. And at the same time, I was doing a lot of things. I was doing promotion, I was in sales, I was running Henry wherever he needed to go. I was answering the phones, I was in sales, I was packing boxes. I did anything. I mean, I wanted to learn it all. I thought, you know, I wanted to be in the business. I even started a management company there to handle the artists, the acts that were there. And I started managing Timmy Thomas when he had his big hit, Why Can't We Live Together? And I booked him on a show in Washington, D.C. with Rare Earth. And the whole audience had whistles. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And so I wrote this song. And so prior to that, I'd gone to a wedding. I think it was Betty Wright's or somebody's wedding. Clarence, somebody got married, and they hired a junkanoo band. And a junkanoo band is a Caribbean type of sound band. It's steel drums, it's regular drums, it's horns, it's whistles, it's cowbells, and it's very infectious. So I thought and I thought, wow, if I could get, you know, and they had the whistles, and I thought the whistles in the Rare Earth concert in Washington, D.C., and I thought, I need to make this record called Blow Your Whistle and use this, bring this sound to the world, you know, because I don't know if it had ever, you know, whatever. So I write this song called Blow Your Whistle. It's time to come up with a name of the record, the artist. And I think, well, I'm not going to call it me. And so I called it Casey and the Sunshine, after the state of Florida, a junkanoo band, because I used the Miami junkanoo band to play. And so the idea was going to be, those records were going to be Casey and the Sunshine junkanoo band. So I make this record, and it makes a lot of noise in a lot of places. It goes to top 18 or whatever on the Billboard R&B charts. It's making noise in Europe, you know, going even higher on local charts in the US or whatever.
And this is what now? This is about 1973?
That was be 1973, exactly. August 13th, 1973, I signed my contract. So now they want another record. And I thought, wow, you know.
Now you're in the game. Now you're in the game.
They want another record by Casey and the Sunshine Band. And so, you know, back then used to have these charts, radio stations to put out, and it was always hard for them to put the whole name. So I dropped the junkanoo thing, and I decided to do this record about horns, sound your funky horn. And Uh, um, uh, so I proceeded to do that record. That record makes the same kind of noise, a little bit even more noise than Blow Your Whistle did. Now they want an album. But meanwhile, while I'm working on that album, Timmy Thomas's organ that he used on Why Can't We Live Together was upstairs in the studio. And I go in there and I hit the samba sound or whatever it was. I can't remember which one it was, the rhythm sound. And I started playing these chords or whatever, which became the beginning of Rock Your Baby. And I just felt that the song, you know, and I remember playing it back. This is before the guitar was even on. I thought, wow, this track is unbelievable. You know, it was just hypnotic. It was just something about it. And I'll never know to this day how to even explain it, but I knew there was something special about this track. So initially, I think I was going to put wanted Jimmy Bohorn to come sing on it or whatever. And Jimmy didn't show up that day, but George McRae walked through the door and I was in the back of the audience of Henry's office. And I said, come over here a minute or whatever. And I hummed this melody to him. And when he started singing it, I knew right away that this was the song for him. And we went upstairs and put his vocal on it. And, you know, it came out in April or whatever. And 6 weeks later, whatever, was #1 in 51 countries around the world. And I remember, you know,
were you the producer and the writer on that?
Yes. And up to that point, you know, there were clubs out there and stuff, but they were just playing, you know, whatever 45 was out at the time. You know, every 3-minute, 4-minute song, whatever, go to the next one, the next one. And Henry and I decided that we needed to make a long version of this Rock Your Baby record for the clubs. And so I took George's vocal out of the middle of it and spliced it, made it, he sang the first part of it, then was the long instrumental, and then it finished the way it did and became a 6-minute version of Rock Your Baby, which kind of became the first, that I know of, the first disco remix record in the country in 1974. Meanwhile, you know, you weren't calling it disco. I mean, what I was doing was R&B pop. And my goal was to create a sound, to create an energy. I felt music had gotten really dark and I wanted to bring energy into music. I wanted to bring more energy into it and more life into it. So I wanted to do an album that from side A to side B was all up tempo, at least mid to up tempo, whatever, no ballads, nothing like that on the album at all. And that was the whole idea of the first album and every album after that until I did Please Don't Go in 1979.
But this is now the first album as Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Right.
That follows Blow Your Whistle,
so what
Sound the Funky Horn, and Rock Your Baby.
Right. So what happens is when Rock Your Baby's a big hit, now the owner, I've already started recording stuff for Casey and the Sunshine Band album, and there's a song on there called Queen of Clubs that I wrote. And the owner of the record company in Europe comes over and says, can I hear the new Casey and the Sunshine Band stuff? Or the, you know, because things were happening over there. And he says, so I play it. He hears the Queen of Clubs. He says, this is a smash in my country. Well, I'm thinking, how does he know that or whatever? I mean, I thought it was a good song. And so he takes it over there. It goes to #4. And then it spreads all over Europe. We couldn't give it away here in the States. And I go over there and I do a 48 city tour in 24 days, 2 cities a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you do what you need to do to get it done.
I do what I need to do.
And that's Harry Casey. That's what Harry Casey did.
And I was supposed to go over there. It was October or September, whatever. My appendix burst and I had emergency appendectomy. 30 days later, or 45 days later, I went over and I did this tour with a, you know, like this elastic thing that I put around me to kind of keep me together, I guess. Because they did an exploratory on me because they weren't sure if it was, you know, my appendix or not. So they cut me 6 inches from my navel down, and I didn't have just a little cut here. So I did that tour, 48 cities in 24 days.
And that's 1974.
It's 1974.
You come back to the States.
Come back to the States, and it's November, and then that's when I recorded Get Down Tonight, and That's the Way I Like It at the end of 74.
Oh, those little records,
Those little,
those little inconsequential records,
right.
which
And then my sound, everything kind of changed for me at that point. I mean, if you listen to the first album, I'm a lot more vocally not strained, but everything changed a little bit from the first record to the second record. It's like, oh, I got this now.
interesting thing is all of this is happening around this perfect disco storm.
Right.
You know, once,
Well, I knew, especially when I came back from England, I knew that there was like, a club scene here, sort of. But when I went there and I did 48 cities in 24 days, and most of them were these huge clubs, and I thought, oh my God, this is just a matter of time. This is the new thing. This is what's going to bust out all over everywhere. And it's not going to be great for musicians and stuff because it's just DJs spinning records at these clubs or whatever. And it's huge. Everyone was packed. I mean, maybe because we were coming, I don't know. But it was very interesting because these were clubs and you definitely knew they were spinning records, but then they would have live acts come in like us and
right.
Wham. I remember Wham, we were side by side on the tour in the beginning and stuff, at one point. So it was very interesting, but I knew then that I definitely was on the right track and that I was in the middle and the beginning of something that was going to be huge.
What's interesting is that you talked about, growing up in a house that was surrounded by music, especially your mom and her penchant toward R&B and Black artists necessarily. And if we remember the early songs that were played in discotheques in the United States were really just up-tempo R&B records.
Correct.
The Philly International records, some Motown records. There weren't disco records.
Oh, no, well,
in other words, not music specifically made for the disco.
Right.
And I don't believe from what you're telling me.
I mean, they really played a little bit of everything sometimes.
Right,
if it had a rhythm, if it was funky enough to have a rhythm, it got played.
Right. So in terms of, it was sort of up-tempo funk, it was a bit down-tempo funk. Records like Manu Dibango's Soul Makossa, right? Philly International, as I mentioned, the OJs.
Right.
Then you had the Spinners, you had the Intruders, right? So it's not, from what you're telling me, that you went out specifically to write, produce, and record these records as Casey and the Sunshine Band to fit the disco movement. The disco movement aligned itself with music that you were doing that seemed to be successful in the UK that you believed would and ultimately did become this movement in the United States that spawned an incredible period.
The movement was already happening in the United States, the UK thing just solidified the fact of how big it was going to become. You know what I mean? I mean, all the other, records that were being played, again, when you'd buy their albums, there was these slow songs. There was nothing like our records, that everything was up tempo when you side A to side B.
Fun. And yeah. I also read somewhere once that some of the lyrics in some of your earlier records, the 75s, 1975, etc., some stations thought they were a little provocative.
Well, I mean, they, especially Shake Your Booty, yes. But I mean, they could all be, a lot of time you can interpret a song to be anything you want it to be. I mean, they were really written about being in love and the things that you do when you're in love with someone, not just because you're a whore or running around or whatever all over the place, but because hopefully you're in a relationship with someone, and these are the things you do with someone you love, or tell people, somebody you love, that you know what I mean, you want to do.
What was the song? There was one specific song, I think, that certain programmers had difficulty with. Was it Get Down Tonight? Or was it Shake Your Booty? I think it
Well,
was Get Down Tonight, wasn't it?
I know there was Jesse Jackson came out against Shake Your Booty and whatever for for whatever reasons, but I'm sure there was backlash on all of them, but I didn't think they were any more risque than anything else I'd grown up to. I mean, there was a song out called Je t'aime mon non plus that
Sure.
was totally sexual. I mean, they were like making love on the record. So
As did Love to Love You Baby,
right,
Donna Summer,
yeah,
right?
that one
So,
too. Yes.
so it's interesting,
So,
how times have changed a little bit, and I think to some degree times have remained the
and
same.
then
So
when I was a kid, there was Louie Louie that had supposedly all these dirty words in it. I mean, and then there was I love that dirty water. Oh, Boston, Boston, you're my home. Along
so
with mothers, fuckers, and thieves. They supposedly were the words. Not
so the mid 70s is a culmination of a change in music,
right,
your commitment to keeping everything up tempo, clearly dance floor friendly. And the period then jumps from records that are played in clubs that stations didn't want to commit to, certainly in New York,
right.
but that became so popular in what were then just called discotheques that radio stations were now being forced to pay attention to.
Well, you have to understand. I mean, this yes, that was happening, but that's been happening throughout the history of music, especially with R&B records or country records, what they called a crossover record. So the club records became another avenue, like R&B radio or country or rock or whatever, that crossed over to pop, because pop for some reason doesn't get it, and they wait for everything all the time.
Ultra conservatives.
They wait for everything to be proven before they go on, and then they come out, oh, we were the first star. Bullshit. You know what I mean? So yeah, the clubs became another avenue for companies, for artists to get their music heard if the radio wasn't going to play it. And and so therefore it would force a lot of stations on records that they just were ignoring for whatever reason, because there was a lot of, I think there was a lot of, I think a lot of station owners and or people or felt this new wave coming. They were feeling it, and it scared them. It was like we were changing music, like the Beatles changed music in the 60s, and like Elvis changed it in the 50s. And here we were changing it now in the 70s.
Frightening to some.
There was a lot of fear of that change and of what that could be.
What we also know about the disco movement is the disco movement, club culture, mid 70s into late 70s, was also connected with a newfound sexuality, was a predominance of or encouragement of drug use, right? All of which certainly in New York was true.
I don't think, I think the drug use was there way before all of that. To me, the 70s in this movement was the celebration of all the things that everybody in the 50s and 60s picketed for: love, peace, equality, the ecosystem, I mean, the ecology, all these things. It was the culmination, and loving one another and accepting your neighbors. And it was the culmination of finally all of that coming together. And I think it was the celebration of all of that. Why it became getting these bad names, because it's something that was already happening before it got to that point, except the only thing is all of a sudden now we could talk about it. We didn't have to hide it anymore. You didn't have to hide your feelings. You didn't have to feel suppressed, racially, religion, just every kind of way. You didn't have to, you did in a way, but you didn't have to do it to the extent you did in all the years before that.
And people always talk about when you go on the dance floor, you forget your worries. You're just there to have a good
Sure,
time.
that's throughout history. That's, this is, people have been dancing. There's the American Bandstand sock hops that came on every weekend or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, You know, there was always the dances at the schools. And what did you do when you went there? You forgot about everything going on and you just had the time of your life. That's what it was about.
So
That's what music is. Music is our escape. Music is our life. It's what we escape into to sometimes help us through a bad day, a bad moment, or help us maybe even find the way, give us some insight into somebody else's situation that somebody's written about that applies to us and helps us make a change and grow ourselves from listening to it, from those lyrics or whatever it was, whatever they're saying. Sometimes in good ways, sometimes maybe in not so good ways. But it's definitely, that's what it is.
So getting back to your songs, That's the Way I Like It, number one in 1975. Get Down Tonight, number one in 1975. Shake, 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 Shake Your Booty, number one.
Right.
I'm Your Boogeyman, number one. Keep It Coming, Love, the least successful of your records, goes to number two.
No, actually, it was a number one record. It was a number one record all over the country. It was number one in Record World, Cashbox, just not Billboard.
Interesting. So right. So that actually is five number ones.
Right, but if you looked at every chart in the country at the time, it was number one on the top of every chart in the country. Why You Light Up My Life. The only thing I can think of is that Keep It Coming Love had been out for a while. And as you know, you get points for coming up and down according to your sales and everything. You Light Up My Life came out and had massive record sales or something. And that maybe pushed it over to number one because that week of the period, the sales outsold Keep It Coming Love that already had sold 2 million records. You know what I mean?
So let's talk about.
So I always look at Keep It Coming Up as a number one record because to me, number two is number one.
Well, and so in terms of millions, because back then you could sell millions. Today, it's very difficult. How many millions of singles have you sold?
Oh, I don't know.
Approximately.
I don't know. I mean,
it's very interesting you don't know because you know.
I mean,
hang on. You know, when I mentioned to you,
I would think really total record sales worldwide is probably close to 100 million. I don't know. I would think it's way up.
Not a bad couple of years' work.
Right. I mean,
incredible. And so this is all on TK Records out of Florida.
Correct.
You then go from TK Records. Oh, hold on for a second. Let's also remember a record called Boogie Shoes that was included in Saturday Night Fever.
Right, and also
which at that time was the biggest selling soundtrack of all time.
Right, now Boogie Shoes, you have to realize, is already the B-side of Shake Your Booty.
I didn't know that.
It's just
I did not know that.
It just sold 3 or 4 million records.
So how did that single, ultimately a track on Saturday Night Fever, get listed as a B-side? Interesting. Just like I Will Survive, who's actually
I always selected what went on the B-side.
Did you select the B-sides?
Yes, a lot of times my B-sides were songs that were never on any albums in the beginning. So when it came to Shake Your Booty, I just pulled Boogie Shoes from the second album, and used it as the B-side of Shake Your Booty.
Was that ever released as a single?
Huh?
Was Boogie Shoes ever released as a single?
After Saturday Night Fever came out.
I bet it was.
Indeed. And then I Get Lifted became the B-side of Boogie Shoes.
Gotcha.
So Boogie Shoes had already been, it was already probably a huge record. Shake Your Booty probably could have been a double A side with Shake Your Booty and Boogie Shoes at the time.
And I don't know if you know this, but do you know that Shake, Shake, Shake Your Booty is in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the distinction of a song with the most amount of same words of any title of a pop record? Did you know that?
Next to My Sharona, I think those two are in the tops there.
So you're on TK Records, obviously the story of basically hanging out, doing bibs and bob jobs. I mean, you knew as well as I do that you did that to get into that system, and it worked like a charm.
Right.
And then your time at TK Records ends. Talk to me about the transition of TK to, I believe it was CBS Records. Because it was then CBS, not
The
Sony.
reason it came to an end is I signed with management in California with the Catskill and Amori. They had Cher, they had Dolly Parton, Joan Rivers, Mac
What year
David,
is this?
1978, 1978, 79, 70, somewhere around there. And so what we did is we audited TK and found out that they probably owed me around $9 million. And so,
How was that?
huh?
Why and how was that?
Why did they owe me $9 million? Because they didn't report everything, I guess. I don't know. But they owed me $9 million. And so I thought about it a lot. And I thought I could either go into a lawsuit or whatever, or I could move on. And my managers felt like I should move on. I felt like TK had started abandoning me. Here I was, the group that had put them on the map. I was the group that had brought in all the other artists and signings that they were having.
George
And
McRae.
had a new group of people coming in doing promotion and everything. And I felt those people were trying to push their own agendas, and Case in the Sunshine Man was not such an important agenda to TK anymore. That's what I felt. And I thought, you know what? It's time to move on, you know? And so I pretty much said, take the $9 million and shove it and let me out of my contract, or I was at the end of it or whatever it was. And I moved on to Epic.
And then at Epic, music started to change a little bit. There was this disco backlash in the late 70s, which,
Well, and I felt I had already gone past that because I had the first #1 song was a ballad of 1980. I had Yes, I'm Ready, that became a #1, #2 song with Terry
Please Don't Go was the first #1 of 1980, right?
Right.
And that's now on Epic Records.
No, that was the last one on TK.
Oh,
I had the obligation to do one more album on TK. I made it a solo album, and I didn't care how it came out or how. I regret doing that to this day, to just doing a throwaway album and not caring so much about it.
So the throwaway album did spawn a #1 record.
No, the throwaway album did not spun anything.
Oh, okay. Well,
it was not one of my greatest achievements at all. Not where I would have wanted to go.
We all have, Harry, we all have those moments.
Right. So it was a fuck you album, and I'm sorry I ever did a fuck you album. I never should have done that because that affected me more than it affected the company. So
tell me about the story of Give It Up, which ultimately.
Well, I mean, so I go to Epic, and I do this first album for them or whatever, and I have a lot of input from my managers, from Epic or whatever. And what I guess I really didn't realize at the time, it was Michael Jackson was on the same label. And what I come to find out is they were taking all this energy and putting it into Michael. It's like they were buying everybody up, or, you know, nothing else was happening on Epic but Michael. I mean, they just took all the energy. So I do this album, they go, great, it's great, it's this, and then I see nothing happen to it. I go into whoever it was at the time. I think it became Frank DeLeo, who eventually became Michael's manager.
Okay.
And I said, don't ever, I'm not a charity case. You don't have to give me $250,000 and then you don't believe in it. And don't, you know what I mean? Don't tell me you believe in something or whatever, and it's not up to par. It's not what, you know, I'm not a charity case here. If you want to give charity, go give it to somebody else, and I want out of my contract. So they said, okay, it won't happen again. So I do my second album, and it's called All in the Night's Work, and I do Give It Up, and another song called You Said You'd Give Me Some More and everything. So Give It Up, so Give It Up becomes, so there's,
Give It Up is the #1 record in the UK.
Right. So the second album's not happening, and I'm going through problems with Sandy Gallon and Epic or whatever. And I think I get dropped by both of them the same time, or the year, or we separate or whatever. And meanwhile, in the UK, Give It Up becomes #1 6 weeks in a row. all over Europe. And so, no, I was still with Epic at the time. And it says, why won't you put this record out? I owe you already now $500,000. You give me $250 for each album. Why won't you put this? We're not going to put it out. We're not going to release it. What? Are you crazy? It's #1, 6 weeks in the UK, in Belgium, in Italy, everywhere in the world. Why wouldn't you put it out and capitalize on it? So I said, fine, I want out of my contract and I want the rights to that song because I want to put it out in the United States of America. So what do? They give me $100,000 and they give me the rights to the song. And I put it out in the US myself.
On your own label.
On my own label.
And it goes top 20 pop.
Again, the record was a #1. Same thing happened with, so what happened with Please Don't Go, the radio station in Miami, Y100, went on it very early off the success of the UK and some other major stations. By the time the record caught up to the stations had already been on 6, 7, 8 weeks, were already starting to drop the numbers. So it didn't reflect the actual number of its chart position in all the stations in the US of A. Again, every station in America had it at #1 for 5 to 6 weeks. It only reflected in Billboard at number 18 or whatever it was, because of their system for calculating where your record goes on the chart.
But my point is, major label decides not to do it.
Right.
You decide to do your own label, and the record goes top 20 pop. This is a massive success story.
Absolutely.
Because back then, unlike now, if you're not signed to a major label,
right,
who to a large extent control the business, how does a small guy, as a record label owner, not an artist, but as a record label owner,
right,
also artist, also producer, also songwriter, go it alone?
Well, all the independents embraced me. They were excited.
Yeah, of course.
They were excited to have me back.
Because the human loves the underdog also, doesn't it?
They were excited to have me back. More KC music for them.
Right. And
that record wasn't called KC the Sunshine Man, it just came out as KC.
Tell me about your collaboration with Terry DeSario.
Well, Terry and I went to school together, elementary, junior high, high school, and we always had a very special bond. We always performed at every little sock hop or whatever. I'll never forget this one thing that happened, and her and I talk about it a lot. Back then, some records would come out, and the A side would be the vocal version, the B side would be the instrumental. And so when I would go to do these sock hops and perform in them or whatever at the school dances, sometimes I would use the instrumental of a record and just sing over top of it. Okay. So the song was Agent 00 Soul by Edwin Starr. And this was my first time, actually it was the first time of me actually using a record to sing to. Before it would be just me doing a song or whatever. They would always have this little break from the dancing and have some of the people in the choir and stuff sing or whatever. So songs like Moon River, things like that. So it was my first time kind of doing a record or whatever. And I put on the record and it starts to play and I'm doing the song and all of a sudden the record starts to skip.
Oh, you're talking about singing actually to the vinyl.
Yes, to the vinyl.
Oh,
and the vinyl starts skipping on this record.
Oh my God.
I flip out.
I'm sorry to laugh. I'm sure you were not happy.
But it's kind of funny in a way, because I'm like, what the fuck? And so I kind of run out or whatever there, and I guess I'm very upset. I might have been crying or whatever. And she comes running out after me and she says, you got to go back in there and just start over and do it again or whatever. So I can't remember if I flipped it back over and then sang to the vocal version or they made an adjustment or whatever, but I went back in and I did the song, and that's just one thing her and I share, whatever. So meanwhile, all through school, and after school was over, I I always kept tabs on Terry. She loved folk music. She would do a lot of like these local little folk lounges locally and things and stuff. We weren't in college together, but I always kind of kept tabs of Terry. And one day I was listening to the radio and I hear this song on the radio called Ain't Nothing Gonna Keep Me From You. And they say it's by Terry DeSario. And so I called Bill Tanner, who was the radio program that says, can you get me Terry's phone number? I want to talk to her. So I called Terry and I asked her, I said, so what's going on? She says, not so good. The label's going to drop me.
That's Casablanca, right?
Yes. The label's going to drop me. And I said, what are you talking about? So I knew Neil Bogart. And I went to Neil Bogart and I said, I want to produce an album on her. And he said, sure, let's do it.
And there you are again. And so that's Harry. There you are again.
And her and I, decided on to do Yes, I'm Ready. We also did Dancing in the Streets. And then we did some other songs that she wanted to record, and her and her husband had written, and this other writer named Joey Carbone had written or whatever. That record became number 2, number 1 all over the country and all over the world. The rest of the album kind of fizzled out, but and then we did one more album.
Another monster pop record.
Another monster.
Harry Casey.
Yeah.
So on the other side, I read where you had a car accident.
That was all like in the middle of the Epic thing. It was right before that second album came out.
Are you okay talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going somewhere and the light turned yellow and I was in the middle. I couldn't stop. I was right at the edge of the thing when it turned yellow, and a car came across to make a left or whatever and just came right across and hit me kind of head on. And so first I went home, and then when I got home, I was going to go to I went to the hospital, and then they sent me, then I went home, and then my father came in and I didn't know who my father was or whatever, and they sent me back to the hospital. And so I laid there for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, because I had, my doctor had said I had the impact had almost severed the nerve, in my back or whatever. I remember not being able to like pick my arm up, to hold a phone or whatever. I remember at one point getting in a wheelchair and rolling out into the hallway and couldn't get back. I just I couldn't do anything. So it was a lot of therapy, sitting with traction for 9 months or more every day, hanging this bag over my door with a weight on it and sitting there with traction because a nerve takes a long time to heal. So that kind of put things, on hold a little bit for that Give It Up album, the All in the Nights at Work album that was coming out.
And you ultimately...
I remember listening to the All in the Nights. Yeah, and another thing that happened is Epic took so much interest that they got a guy by the name of John Luongo to remix Give It Up, and You Said You'd Give Me Some More. And he turned that record around.
John actually is one of the first 5 people that I met in the music business when I was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
I was at Brandeis in Boston. I was DJing at a black club in Kenmore Square called Kicks.
Right.
In walks John Luongo with another fellow by the name of Joey Carvello, and they introduced themselves to me, and they look after me, and they introduced me to...
I had heard of Joey Carvello. I had never had heard of John Luongo until Epic.
Right.
On that
so they basically ushered me into the music business. They accepted me in Boston. For years, people thought I was actually from Boston when I was really from Manhattan. A funny story I want to share with you very quickly is you were talking about as a retailer seeing and reading the label copy on these 45s and on these albums, right? I remember DJing at this club in Boston called Kicks, and I'm ready to play a Grace Jones record called La Vie en Rose. And I'm holding the record to cue it up, and what do? You have nothing else to do but to read the label. And I notice on the bottom of the label is the address of the record label.
Right.
which is the name of the record label. The first record label that signed Grace Jones, sidebar, is called Beam Junction Records. And the address, Harry, is 360 East 72nd Street, which
Right.
is the apartment building I was raised in Manhattan.
Oh my God.
And I'm in Boston going to school, and I'm thinking, wait, hold on. What? During my Christmas break, I go back home and I ring the buzzer of the apartment number for Beam Junction Records, and it's true. Cy and Eileen Berlin signed Grace Jones when she was a model from France. I used to hang out in their apartment. I used to hang out in TK Records, and they introduced me to all these DJs that would come in and out of the apartment that they were getting promos for. And that's how I got involved in the music business in New York. I digress. Okay, so that was then. Disco has returned, Harry, in a massive way.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you tour constantly, notwithstanding COVID. How many dates pre-COVID do you do a year?
It varies, probably about 70 or so a year.
And you don't, and I know for a fact that you don't tour alone. How many people go on the road with you?
There's 15 of us plus 5 crew. There's 20 altogether. It's a lot to move around.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if anybody ever doubted whether disco is relevant or not, it's so interesting, especially now during COVID. We find that in terms of streaming platforms, that while overall streams, of course, have gone up because people are home, that the largest increase in streams is with catalog music.
Yeah.
Because people consider catalog music sort of the auditory version of comfort food. And guess whose records are being played a lot again? Casey and the Sunshine Band.
I have to tell you a story. There's this app called Garden Radio.
Garden Radio?
Yeah. And you click on it and it shows the whole world. And it's all full of green dots. And you can zero in on any green dot in any country around the world and hear that radio station playing at the time.
Outstanding.
So I go and I click on this one dot. First one,
Where?
the second one.
Where?
I can't remember where it was. It was, I don't know if it was somewhere in the US, somewhere in the US, I think. And what are they playing is a song I wrote called I Can't Leave You Alone by George McCrae. So then I go and I click on a radio station in California, some city I've never heard of. What pops up? Keep It Coming, Love. I mean, what were the odds of that?
Well, here's my next point.
And then I find in Florida, there's a radio station, a dance station called TK Disco.
Ah, TK Disco. You
And
remember them, TK? No?
Yeah.
That would, actually, TK Disco was the name of their disco label, was it
Oh,
not?
yes.
With the bamboo lettering?
Right.
Ah, right.
See, I created the whole TK label. They had what was called TK Productions. There was no label until I came along and made it a label. And in the beginning, the only people that were going to be on that label would be George McCrae or Casey and the Sunshine or anyone I produced would only be on the TK label. That's why you very seldom saw the TK, anybody else on the TK label.
And then they had these one-offs like At Midnight and
They were never on the TK label until we did the disco
TK Disco.
and then we called it TK Disco.
So to your point about, these records constantly being, resurfaced, right?
Yeah.
What I've noticed, and this is even before the resurgence of disco, which seems to come every 7 or 8 years, is that your songs have enjoyed a Herculean number of sync licenses on television commercials.
All over everything.
How do you explain this? I mean, it's something for you, Harry. Maybe it's natural for you, but believe me when I tell you, it's very rare that people get 1 or 2. But there's always a Casey and the Sunshine Band song on some product that has nothing to do with music. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well,
Brilliant.
You have to understand, there are different types of songwriters. I'm a commercial songwriter. The Beatles in the beginning of their career were commercial songwriters than they became later on. There are writers that are storytellers. There's writers who, I mean, there's different times. I'm a more commercial writer. So it made sense, or it makes sense that those songs, That's the Way I Like It, or Get Down Tonight, or Shake Your Boot, or Keep It Coming, Love, that advertisers gravitate toward them to use them for products. It makes complete sense.
Well, I don't actually
Especially
think
if
you're
you
giving yourself, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, and I'll tell you why.
Well, I mean, they were
Many
great
people,
songs. I mean, what do you want?
but,
They were
but
great
what-
songs. Everybody put me down and, tried to wash over the whole thing. But yeah, they were great songs. I'm a great songwriter. What can I tell you?
well, there you go. And, and you could admit that.
You know what?
Nothing wrong with it.
That's not who I really am. I don't go around professing.
No, you are not. I've known you and have had the luxury of working with you.
I'm very humble. I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful. And I feel very blessed that I've been able to, or that I was able to achieve the American dream, to bring happiness into people's lives, to give them something to continually hold on to brighten their day, and to attach itself to a whole new generation of today and to come. And it's a real blessing. Everyone has their purpose here on earth, and God gave me that purpose, and I'm so thankful for that gift. And I'm glad that I was able to use that gift to do this for many, many people.
And we're happy to have you. And there are, so many people in this world never really find their calling.
Right.
But you knew this early going as a child, and you found it. And not only did you find it, Howard.
With that question, with that statement, whenever I'm asked what advice do you have for people, and it's just like a friend of mine who wanted to be a football star or whatever, and it just didn't work out for them. I says, what do you love the most? He says, football. I says, well, become a coach, work for the owner, do something that's around football, because that's what you love. You don't have to be the quarterback. There's so many other positions. You could do marketing, you could do you could do everything. Well, he became a coach at LSU, and so I always tell everyone, it's important that we just follow our dreams and follow our heart. You followed yours, you put yourself around what you love to do, and this is why you're successful at what you do. And people that are successful are the ones that put themselves into the situations that they actually love, and not because they're just doing it for the paycheck or whatever. When you do it for the paycheck, I can't see you being successful. You have to do it for the love of what you're doing. The paycheck, all that comes naturally if you do and enjoy what you love, and you immerse yourself into that situation. You can't go wrong. You can't lose.
When I was a kid, one of the things
Even if you feel like you are, but you have to accept the degree of whatever that is. I always set myself up to fall back, whether I could become a teacher. It was going to be in music somehow, some way, some form. Promotion, sales, management, agent. I didn't mind being in the background. I was going to be in this industry, and no matter how I got there, I did interviews. I remember interviewing Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, and all these people became kind of my friends and people I knew, even before I was successful.
So you understand why I'm so grateful to speak with you today, because when I was a kid, one of the things my dad used to say was, Brad, if you're truly blessed, you will love what you do for a living. He said,
Right.
as men, we have to work more during our waking hours in this society than really anything else.
Right.
And he said, if you love your job as much as I love my job, my dad was a jewelry designer. He said, we're truly blessed. And I will add on to that if you do what you love, to your point, you will always be okay financially because you want to do it a lot.
Right.
That I am not the kind of guy, and Harry, you don't strike me as the kind of a guy, and I've worked with you for 4 or 5 years, gratefully, that would do something just to do it and get it done. You do it to do it right, or you don't bother doing it at all.
Right.
And therein lies the formula. And the fact of the matter is, to the story about your friend and wanting to be a football player, it's about staying in the game.
Yep.
That, your story of being raised in working in the record shop and around a record label and producing and writing for basically the artists that nobody looked after, interestingly enough.
Right.
Reminds me a lot of who you are. Sort of this underdog who looks after others, whether it's producing for Terry DeSario or George McRae. You know, I can't say as you did it because you felt bad for them. You did it because you love music, but there is a part of you, because I know you well enough, that there is this, you're an incredibly sensitive guy. And that's what speaks to music. It's this thing, it's this, you know, we hear music and it puts us in a place of joy or sadness. It evokes memories from 40 years ago. If you haven't heard that record, you know where you were the first time you heard it, Harry.
Right.
And we move forward, in our case, 40 or 50 years. But I even submit to you that while you say, well, you know, I write commercial songs and that's why, you know, they're in sync licensing, that's not it. Because a lot of people write commercial songs, Harry. No one, or a handful of people, have had so many top charting records around the world, but your songs have this endless fucking life.
I know.
If they will go on way past you and I. So I'm going to say thank you. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I am a massive fan. I know you have new material coming up this year. Is that right?
I do. Well, at some point, I have 52 brand new tracks to release. So.
Oh, wait, only 52?
Only 52.
What's the matter? You slacking? Since when are you slacking? Get to it, Harry.
I
Get to it.
I had to put a cap on it.
Harry, Casey,
it's an 8-year project. And, you know, I've been releasing some songs that were part of the 8-year project, but they're not part of the 52.
And you also do the Ultimate Disco Cruise, I think?
Yeah,
when it goes out there?
We were scheduled to do it this year, and then it's been postponed now, I think, to 2022. Everything's going to be pushed to 2022. I mean, that's just the way it's going to go.
Well, I suspect Casey and the Sunshine Band will be just fine.
We'll be out there doing something.
Harry, God bless you. I love you. I thank you. And I wish the best, because you deserve the best.
Thank you, Brad. Have a good day.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.